Let's get this. Come on. Go live. Jesus. All right, let's do this if it will let me. Let's play a little intro, guys.
This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch.
Good evening, and we're back again. Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Latirzo, former fighter, part-time writer, full-time observer, joined by former 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association, Jack Hirsch. Jack, how you doing tonight?
Hey, good, Frank. I'm glad I had it put in my contract. You do the beginning, so this way I come across as the expert analyst. For example, like if we were ESPN, you'd be Joe Tessitore and I'd be Tim Bradley. I know that impresses you.
You could be Tim. You know what, Jack? With what you said last week and all the emails I got with the Sugar Ray Robinson outboxing Marciano and Canelo being a heavyweight, I got a ton of emails, and they want to know what I give you before the show.
They're front runners, the people. Your people are front runners, Frank. They don't listen to the whole sentence. They hear something in the
Jack,
beginning.
it's your delivery.
Talking. They don't know. They don't listen anymore. I said Marciano would ultimately beat Sugar Ray Robinson, but Robinson would outbox him for 8-9 rounds, and then Marciano would grind them down eventually.
I don't think Rocky needs 8 rounds, but anyhow, Jack, before we get to the boxing, I have to get a couple things out for the Philly sports guy, and for some of our boxing guys that follow other sports and Philly sports. All I can say is this: or a couple things are going to happen, and some might be bad, some are going to be good. If the Eagles win the Super Bowl, or one or two things is going to happen with that. They're either going to win the Super Bowl, or they're going to lose, and I'm going to collect a lot of money. But that's one with the Phillies. Either the Eagles, because I'm betting heavy on the Eagles. So either the Eagles win it and I collect, or they lose, I'm happy. And I think the same thing applies to the Phillies. The Phillies win the World Series, I collect. If they don't, I pay up, but I'm happy. And let me just say something else, especially since Joe Bergman's on here chirping already. Jack, Mac, let me tell you something.
Mac's our producer.
Right. There is something about this town that I live outside of, this city, Philadelphia, that when they have a team in the playoffs, I don't think there's another city in this country that takes their sports and their sports teams as takes them as serious and backs them and lives and dies with them like these Philadelphia fans. And I'm telling you, Jack, I can feel it. There's just something about, and it's the last couple of years with the Eagles and the Phillies, you can just sense that the momentum and how the fans get these teams up to play. I've never seen anything like it. I don't think it exists anywhere else in this country. And I'm telling you, when I heard what David Cone said, former Met said the other day, he goes, there's a home field advantage. He says, and then there's playing in Philadelphia. I thought to myself, you know what? He's exactly right. These fans, Jack, in Haddonfield, New Jersey, very small town. You know, they had pep rallies on their main street Monday for the Phillies. It's just off the chart. So my only defense is this. I have to set myself up. If they win, I collect money and I'm less upset. If they lose, it costs me some money, but I'm happy. Floor is
Frank,
yours.
Yeah, Frank, that's not unexpected what you did. You're hedging just like you do on your boxing predictions, saying, well, I picked so-and-so, but I could see the other guy winning if he does this and that. And then when the other guy does this and that, you take full credit, you and Mac together.
Jack, I never hedge. I never hedge. You can say a lot of things about me. I'm opinionated and all that. I never ride the fence. I pick a definitive winner, but like you, I've been around sports enough to know that nothing is a given. I saw Donald Curry get beat by Lloyd Hunnigan. Didn't think that could happen. Saw Mike Tyson get knocked out by Buster Douglas. I thought Tyson was beatable. I just didn't think it was by Buster Douglas.
Well,
But
we get caught in images, okay? Sometimes we don't look at recent form. You know, there's a certain hype surrounding a fighter, and we kind of buy into the hype. And I could sense it a little bit in the David Benavidez, Demetrius Andrade fight. Andrade, at the top of his game, should be able to win that fight. I think he's better than Benavidez, but there's so much more hype surrounding Benavidez than there's Andrade.
because he's
right
fought,
now,
Jack. He's had some
Right,
fights
I
against
don't
some named
disagree.
guys.
I don't disagree. But when you look at accomplishments, I mean, neither guy's accomplished a great amount. But I think in a fight like that, when the hype surrounds a fight like Benavidez so much, Andrade's got to clearly beat him to get a decision. I don't think a legitimately close win for Andrade would result in him actually getting the decision. That's why I'm hedging on who I'm going to pick to win that fight. I'll come up with a prediction, a firm prediction before the fight. But right now, I'll be honest, I just don't know. But it is an intriguing fight, November 20th.
But Jack, since you're the Tim Bradley of this show, you should be happy because I just read an article the other day where Tim Bradley said Benavidez's footwork is so bad, he thinks that's going to create a lot of openings for Andrade. So maybe he is a real live underdog. My counter to that would be that Andrade doesn't have the best footwork either, and I've seen him out of position and fall over his feet a few times. So I don't think that's the be-all, end-all, but that's a big fight coming up. We'll have fun disagreeing on that. And Joe Bergman, let me tell you this. Jack says the Braves win tonight, so I want you to hold him accountable on that. He said the Braves win tonight in Game 5. I think he's wrong.
The Braves win tonight, and then they win Game 5. Phillies don't advance. They don't advance to the next round.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Jack, back to the boxing. So Benavidez and Andrade looks like November 25th.
November 25th.
It just came. I just saw today that they said that Crawford and Spence may fight February 2nd. They haven't determined a weight. I'm going to say now, I think because Crawford is a guy that's into the belts and the records, and if he fights Spence at 154, it's not a title fight. I think he wants the title defense on his record. He earned that by winning the first fight. So I think he's going to force Spence to fight him at 147. And that may be it. That may hold up the fight, actually.
No. Wait. He might force Spence to fight him at 147. But Crawford is basically holding Spence up for more money. He knows Spence doesn't want to fight at 147. And he's basically going to say, okay, I'll fight you at 151, 152, 154, whatever. But you have to kick back X amount of money. Now, if Spence truly believes he'll defeat Crawford, he'll give up a few $1 million. Let's say his payday is going to be $20 million. Spence might want as little as $3-4 million. Spence might be calling his bluff in a sense. I mean, Crawford might be calling Spence's bluff because I get the feeling Crawford would prefer to fight over 147, over that limit. He's already won the belts. It's less about belts to Crawford right now than it is just making big money, supremacy. So if he could get a few million out of Spence, he'll fight at a higher weight class, and Spence might be thinking, hey, there's a good chance I don't beat this guy. I'm a realist. I'm not going to give up this money. I'm guaranteed X amount of money, which is I don't know what the split is. I'll be honest. I haven't heard what the contract is. I'm assuming it's in the 60-40 range for the winner. That's what I originally heard, meaning Crawford 60%, Spence 40%. Why would Spence want to go 65-35? This isn't a way a cash out fight. So maybe Spence has in his mind, I'll work my tail off to get down to 147. I'm not giving you any money. And maybe Crawford eventually says, okay, forget the money. We'll fight at 150 because I don't want to make 147. This is all gamesmanship, Frank.
Okay. Sometimes on this show, when we disagree, it's not clear where we disagree. So here's where I disagree with you. And even though I can see your point, you think Crawford is using the 147 because he wants more money, right? I think Crawford is using 147 because I think he looks at his record and he sees 18 title defenses. Not many guys have made that many in history. And I think he cares about that. He knows he's going to get a lot of money. He's made a lot of money. I think he cares about that. So I think that will be the reason why he sticks to 147. And I also think in the back of his head, Jack, he believes he has less trouble making 147 than Spence does, and he knows he holds the card. So that's where we disagree on the reasoning. I say Crawford, because of the statistics and the legacy of title fights, holds for 147. You think he's using that to get more money, and they'll fight above 147.
Frank, he already said it. He would sell out for more money. I don't know how much more money he wants, but I would assume it would be, if he could get an extra $3-4 million, that's more important to him than
if you're Spence, Jack, do you do that? If I'm Spence, I don't do that because it might be my last fight. I'm not giving $4 million away.
I agree with you. If I was advising Spence, I would tell him just, take the money unless it's in the contract. If you can't make the weight, you have to fork over X amount of money. And if there's a realistic chance Spence just can't get down to 147, then you cut a deal because you're going to get fined a certain amount anyway. You see what you could work out. I don't think the way you do. I don't know what's going on inside of Crawford's head, but I don't feel he's thinking of himself as a legacy fighter. He just wants to establish himself and show he's the best fighter in the world. He talks about getting out of the game soon, 1 or 2 more fights. He wants big paydays. He's had 40 fights. They've asked him, well, you're going to get up to Floyd Mayweather's 50 fights, which is a stupid, it's a manufactured record. It's a media record, the 50 fights. It's stupidity, but people have gone with it for a while. So that makes it, a conversation point. He said, I don't think I'm going to be around to go to 50-0.
Jack, he's not going to get to 50-0, but I see you say he thinks about legacy. To me, I think the legacy is more in the 20 title defenses, more so than the money. Because if I said before, and a lot of the old school guys that you and I communicate with all feel the same way. Look, you have a choice, money or legacy. Floyd Mayweather chose the money, where we can go back at his record and have a lot of questions about his legacy. Crawford has said all along, I want this to be remembered as the Terrence Crawford era. Well, when he piles those title defenses up, I think that helps him more so than him fighting a guy at 151, no title defense for a couple $1 million more. So we'll see. But I think legacy is a big part of Crawford's mindset. And I think that's why we won't see him fight Boots for another year or so, because I think he wants Boots to get a couple big wins under his belt so he can get credit for beating him if he does. So I think Crawford is all about the legacy. I think that's why he won't fight Jermell Charlo. Where I think if Charlo came back,
he doesn't want to know Charlo. Charlo was insulting and this and that, and Crawford didn't have a good personal feeling towards Charlo. And when Charlo got beat by Canelo, Crawford came out on social media and basically taunted, made fun of Charlo. He's saying, I have no interest in fighting you now. Charlo said after losing to Canelo, I'm ready to fight Terence Crawford now. You know, that tough talk meant nothing. Who cares about a Crawford-Charlo fight right now?
They all say things on the spur of the moment. Charlo still has 3 belts. If Charlo comes back and makes a defense against somebody that's decent, and he scores an impressive knockout, he can say, hey, Crawford, guess what? Nobody my weight can beat me. Yeah, Canelo beat me. He's also fought at light heavyweight.
Tim Tszyu is after Charlo. He's not even allowing him to breathe. Every moment he's mentioning Charlo, he's not letting Charlo escape. Either Charlo leaves the junior middleweight division or fights him. Tim Tszyu is really taunting Charlo at every turn. So,
but he also said he'd fight Crawford after this fight.
But if Charlo does fight Tim Tszyu next, assuming Tim Tszyu beats Brian Mendoza, which he should do, this Saturday.
He's a big favorite.
Yeah, he should win that fight. I don't understand the people who say they wouldn't be surprised if it was an upset. I'd really be surprised. But if Charlo could then beat Tim Tszyu clearly in decisive fashion, that would make a fight with Crawford viable again.
Jack, I agree with you, but I also think that if Crawford, let's say Tim Tszyu wins, we're both going to pick him. Let's see Tim Tszyu win Saturday night. Okay, now he has a defense. He's undefeated, and most people look at him. If he's not the best at 154, he's second best. Okay, Charlo has to get that nod until he's defeated. If Charlo makes a defense and looks good, okay, and Crawford has beaten Tszyu, now they both have belts at 154. That's a big fight again.
It is. So no, absolutely.
Because what Canelo did to Charlo won't count because, look, I would never pick Crawford to beat Canelo, so I'm not going to kill Charlo for losing to him. And in some ways, I could see Charlo actually bringing more to that fight than maybe Crawford would because he's a bigger, stronger guy. He's just not as good of a fighter. So I think that fight is plausible. But since we've already talked about it, Jack, let's get into that fight. Tim Tszyu is fighting Brian Mendoza for the WBO junior middleweight title. Mendoza's coming off an impressive come-from-behind win over the Towering Inferno and Sebastian Fundora. He was losing that fight until he caught him, and he kind of caught lightning in a bottle, and he scored a lottery knockout. Tim Tszyu really hasn't looked good. He's an aggressor. He's an attacker. His style travels well, and the only thing about Tim Tszyu is he does one thing, and he does it really good. So for me, the question is, can Mendoza use Tim Tszyu's aggression against him in sort of the manner that maybe Crawford did Spence? I don't think that he can. I think Tim Tszyu overwhelms Mendoza. If he wins by stoppage, it'll probably be after the 7th or 8th round. I don't know about that. I just think he wins the fight, and he looks good and is a conclusive winner when it's over.
I understand that styles make fights, but when Mendoza fought Sebastian Fundora, it didn't look like he even won a round, or maybe one round at most. And that's what the official scorecards reflected. And you ask yourself this, is Fundora nearly as good as Tim Tszyu? I don't think so. I think Tim Tszyu's on a much higher level.
But Fundora's style and size would give him trouble, Jack. I don't think he'd beat him, but he would give him a problem when you're that big.
Yeah, well, he's a freak of nature for his weight, Fundora. But Fundora's not truly a world-class fighter. Tszyu is, even though Tszyu did have problems with Terrell Gosha. He got knocked down early, and he struggled a bit, even though he legitimately won. But I think all fighters go through that at one point or another. Even Terence Crawford, when he went to England and he fought Ricky Burns, he won clearly, but it was like an 8-4 decision. And let's face it, Ricky Burns isn't as good as some of the other guys, that Crawford fought. Burns was
his first title fight, though.
Right. But the point is, he was an established fighter, Crawford.
Right, he's gotten a lot better.
And I even saw, from ringside, Crawford fight Hank Lundy. And until he stopped Lundy midway through the fight, it was a close fight. Lundy was bringing the heat. But Crawford, he responded with plenty of time to spare.
He figures you out.
He figures you out, exactly. Crawford doesn't mind giving away rounds. He's strange in that way. But getting back, with Tim Tszyu, big, strong, powerful guy. You're right what you say, Frank. Can you make his aggression work against him? Because he's going to come forward, try to muscle you, which makes a Charlo fight with Tim Tszyu very, very interesting. And I'm going to tell you, Jermell Charlo has played the part of a bully in a sense. Things about him I didn't like. If someone in the media would predict an opponent would beat him, he would hate that member of the media, and he would basically call them haters. Like, he would take it personal. So either you have to put Charlo in your top 5 pound for pound or whatever number, or he doesn't like you personally. And something about that attitude I really don't like.
He's not an easy guy to like, Jack. There's no doubt about it. And he doesn't come off good.
He might be
not humble.
I don't. He was humble before the Canelo fight, which kind of made you wonder, was it a confidence thing? Did he really believe he was going to beat Canelo? Because he certainly didn't fight with that type of conviction. After 3 rounds against Canelo, you knew Charlo wasn't coming back.
Right. But Charlo against Tim Tszyu, see, because I think Charlo, who has long arms, he can punch with his left, has a good hook, real good right hand. I think against a guy that's just going to constantly come to him, I think that works his favor. I think he's hard to gauge right now. I want to see him again at 154. We don't know what it's going to take out of him. The one thing I will say this, a lot of times when guys go up and come back down, as we saw with Emil Griffith and Roy Jones, they're not the same, but it's not like Charlo packed on weight and built himself up. He just ate more and cut less to make that fight. So he may not be as affected coming back down to 154, but I always favored him to beat Tszyu. I'm not sure we see that fight, but this is what I want, Jack. I want Tim Tszyu to look really good, and I want him to fight, to call out Charlo or Crawford. And I want to see him face one of those 2 guys in his next fight if he wins conclusively against Mendoza.
Yeah, but why? You kind of wonder why he would want to call out Crawford. Charlo, I understand, has belts. He's been on Charlo's trail for a while, and Charlo has nowhere to go. He either has to leave the junior middleweight division to fight Tszyu. He's got nowhere to go now. He really cornered Charlo in a sense. But why would Tszyu want to fight Crawford unless...
Because Crawford's the big fish in the game right now, Jack.
No, the money situation. Unless Tszyu's thinking, even if I lose, I win, and Crawford's a great fighter, I could still...
And if I win...
And if I win, exactly. And I'm going to tell you, it's not beyond, reality that Tszyu could beat Crawford. I wouldn't pick him to beat Crawford at this point. Don't get me wrong. But Tszyu is big, strong, and he comes at you. And if somehow Crawford doesn't slow him down and he could just keep coming and get Crawford against the ropes, maybe win enough rounds that way. If Crawford can't push the button and knock Tszyu out, he could conceivably get outpointed, because we both know Crawford is lackadaisical till he decides to step it up.
I agree with you as far as Tszyu style, I think, is the type style that could bother Crawford. Crowding him, not giving him time, working his body, cutting the ring off. But I just think in this case, I think Crawford has big enough guns to prevent Tszyu from being an issue. It's sort of like, and now it would never be as decisive as this, but why did Roberto Duran look so out of the league against Hearns? Because Hearns was the one guy who could hurt him before he could get inside and work his body. If Duran would have got inside Hearns and got a chance to beat him and slow him down, who knows? But Duran, he couldn't get
shape that night. Just look how pudgy Duran looked. That wasn't
It's
the
Jack. I
Duran
still think
that
it's a
beat
style
Sugar
thing.
Ray Leonard. That wasn't
Hearns
the
ate
Duran
up
that
guys
beat
like
Sugar
that.
Ray Leonard. But with that said, Duran had success late in his career after that. And
Right.
it's not Hearns' fault, anyone's fault that Duran didn't get in tip-top shape for the type of challenge Tommy Hearns presented.
But Jack, what I'm talking about is the style faction is
Yeah.
when you have a guy that's an attacker like Zoo, if he can push you back, he's going to have a good night. Frazier was the same way. Duran was the same way. And if you look at their careers, the only time they were really devastated in a loss was when they finally came up against a guy who they couldn't push back. And in turn, that guy made them go back. And then they looked ordinary. With Zoo and Crawford, it comes down to this. Can Zoo get to Crawford before Crawford takes him apart? Can he get to him without getting hurt and caught? Spence tried it. He got caught. He never recovered. Other guys have tried it. Now, Zoo's a little bigger than those guys. Maybe he would be able to do it. But that's what it comes down to. Who can impose their style more than the other guy could?
But first, Zoo's got to take care of business against Mendoza. Prediction, Frank.
Zoo's going to win. And I'm going to say a late round stoppage. I think he's really keyed up, Jack. I think he sees all the pieces around him and the big fights that are out there, mainly Crawford and Charlo. And I think he knows if he does what he's supposed to do. Like you said, Benavidez he wasn't convincing against Caleb Plant, and that kind of quieted the Canelo conversation. I think if Zoo knows that if he beats Mendoza up and he wins by an impressive style, he has some cachet to go to Crawford or to go to Charlo and say, I'm the guy in the division. You got to come through me. So I think him knowing that, I think he's the fresher guy. I think it's his time. I think Zoo wins by a late round stoppage.
I'm on the court with you, Frank. Zoo in 10 rounds, let's call it, but late round stoppage. I think he gets Mendoza out of there. And he'll be clearly ahead on points when it happens.
Yeah. Look, Tim Zoo's been around enough to know that this is his time to shine. It's like we both know sometimes winning isn't enough. It'll get you back in the picture, but in the demand of the fans, you need a signature showing. And I think Zoo knows that going in. He'll probably wear Mendoza down and stop him. He might be on his feet, but the referee will stop it because
right. There were a couple of fights this weekend, Frank. I don't want to forget about those. Zurdo Ramirez against Joe Smith, both career light heavyweights, but now they're cruiserweights. Both of them were outpointed by Dimitri Bivol. And Smith, it was his first fight in 16 months, and Zurdo was relatively inactive himself. And it was a good fight, a very nice fight with bad scoring. I had Zurdo winning 96-94.
Which is 6-4 in rounds.
6-4, but a solid 6-4. 97-93, I would have been okay with too, but all three judges had it 99-91. Okay?
I didn't see it, Jack. So what was the difference? What was going on in that fight? That 6-4 is somewhat conclusive. What was it about Zurdo that Joe Smith couldn't handle?
Zurdo was just, I hate to say, more skillful at times. Smith was relying on his power, and especially the second half of the fight, he was getting through with some good right hands on Zurdo, hitting him.
Did he phase him?
And he did. At one point, he shook him up, and Zurdo clinched hard. Okay, at one point. And Smith toughed it out as the fight went along. Okay, even the commentators, Chris Mannix and Sergio Mora, they didn't like the official scoring at all. They were complaining about that as well. So it was one of the, but you sometimes wonder about the appeal of the fight. Is in certain judges, they've been, I don't even want to name names now, they've been around forever. and they turn in mediocre scorecards. You get certain really good judges. Sometimes you disagree with their scorecards,
Right.
but all in all, they're solid. Like you see someone like a Steve Weisfeld working, okay? I like Steve's judging. I sometimes disagree, but he's solid. He's consistent. He doesn't come up with these continuous bad scorecards the way some other judges do. And some of the judges who have these controversial scorecards that we complain about, they get rewarded with a big fight right after. Like, what the heck is going on?
Crazy.
You kind of have to wonder. It's sometimes I think, Frank, we should go back to the newspaper decisions. Just let the media send in their score, and that's who the winner is going to be. Again, something like that. And just get a whole media thing. Again, let the fans even decide the darn thing round by round. The fans send in the thing. Who won that round? Majority.
I don't want the fans, Jack, because they're too biased.
No, well, but if you look at some of the scores, round by round, not the end of the fight. You know the problem is with people, Frank. They complain about decisions, yet they haven't scored the fight.
I hate that.
I remember getting in a taxi, and somehow the cabbie was a boxing fan. We're talking boxing, and he says, "Oh, what a bad decision it was. I'm tired of boxing with Leonard being given a decision over Hagler." So I say to him, "How did you score the fight?" He says, "Well, I didn't really score the fight. I just watched it." Yeah, sure, right. I'm going to tell you, if I didn't score fights, I might think a guy who really lost actually won if I didn't score it, because you just have an impression if you watch it that way. But that's another topic. But Joe Smith and Zurdo Ramirez are welcome additions in the cruiserweight division. Even though Joe Smith lost, guess what, Frank? He emerged from the fight as more than a gatekeeper. He can be a contender in the cruiserweight division now, okay? A contender. He doesn't have to fight Beterbiev or Bivol, both who beat him, and he's a fresh face in the division, so he is a contender still, but as a cruiserweight. And the same thing with Zurdo. I think Zurdo can emerge and be a cruiserweight champion, get one of the belts, and so it was win-win, and both of them put up a good fight. Lee Wood and Josh Warrington, terrific fight. Eddie Hearn said after the fight that Lee Wood is the best featherweight in the world. I don't know, could I rate him ahead of a guy like Robeisy Ramirez? I don't think I would. But Lee Wood has done some nice things. He won the fight of the year, knocking out Michael Conlan in 12 rounds. Great fight after getting floored heavily. He got stopped by Mauricio Lara and then dominated.
Came back and stopped him. The decision him.
Decision by a wide margin. And now against Josh Warrington. But Warrington, didn't see what the official cards were, but Warrington looked to be ahead. But you knew the way Warrington was fighting. He seemed to be swinging for the fences on every punch. It reminded me of two runners. One of them is pacing himself, and the other one is exerting more energy. And even though the one exerting more energy is ahead, you figure the one pacing himself is eventually going to catch up to him. And that's what happened. And I'm going to tell you that final combination of Lee Woods that stopped Warrington was really, a terrific series of punches. But then the bell rings ending the round, the seventh. And maybe Warrington should have been given a minute to recover between rounds. If it was early,
a lot of people thought it was a quick hook.
No complaints if it happened early in the round, because if you saw the 4-punch combination, they were flush power shots, one after the other, that dropped Warrington. But tough break for Josh Warrington that, got stopped, even though it was a conclusive finish in a sense. If it wasn't the end of the round, like I said, if it happened with a minute left in the round, I wouldn't have blinked.
Well, they're even talking about a third fight.
They were entertaining. Okay, so so if they
I didn't see that live. I saw the highlights. I thought that Warrington should have had a shot to come out for the 8th round. Well, Lee Wood, as our friend Ben Dowdy said, is the miracle man, like Matthew Saad Muhammad. His career is something else, and like he said, he has no quit in him, and it's like you can't count him out until the fight's over.
It's funny. I got to meet Lee Wood at the Boxing Writers dinner in June. So what happened? Lee Wood was there, and I forgot the reason why, because he was in the Fight of the Year against Michael Conlan. We honored the honorees from the 2 years before. I'm talking to Iran Barkley, who's from New York as I am, who I know quite well. And if someone comes over and they want to meet Iran Barkley, they're excited. And they have someone standing with them. And I kind of do a double take. This guy looks familiar. And I go, "You Lee Wood?" And he goes, "Yeah." So, quick chat, it's friendly, but I got a big kick out of meeting him.
Nice. What else you have, Jack?
Okay. On the Canelo show, we didn't talk. Floyd Mayweather has a young prospect. How do you pronounce his name? Carmel Moten. Okay? Moten.
1-0, big amateur career.
Right. He made his debut. Now, what was interesting, before he made his pro debut, Floyd Mayweather, whether he was telling the truth or not, challenged Lee Wood. Now, anyone could challenge anyone, Frank. That's
right.
Nice. I think Moten will fight him. Put an offer on the table. Force the issue. That's what I hate about these challenges. No offers made. One fighter's challenging you. "Oh, I want to fight you. You're ducking me." Put a darn offer on the table. What's Lee Wood going to say? "I'm going to fight you," or not knowing what the money is? So Floyd Mayweather, for all his money, why didn't he say to Lee Wood, $5 million to fight Moten in his debut? Something to that effect. And Bill Moten is the next Floyd Mayweather. Reportedly, Moten has been with Floyd since he's been 8 years old. What is he, 17 now?
17, had 130 wins as an amateur, 20 national titles.
Right. And
I didn't see him fight, Jack, so I can't speak to him. But I know that Bootsy Ennis, Jaron Ennis' father, thinks he's like the next big star coming. And that says a lot to me, because he's currently guiding the current next big star in his son.
Right. Say what you want about Mayweather, but his gym is a nice breeding ground for certain fighters. They come there when they're very young. They do, they could develop and be very good. And it could be a good training facility. And it's easy to forget Floyd was in charge of Tank Davis's career for a while. And
Jack, if I was a young fighter, nobody managed the game better than Mayweather. I would look to him and take whatever advice he say. With these young kids today, he carries a lot. That'd be like them talking to Michael Jordan. He carries a lot of weight. They know he knows the game. Nobody can dispute, regardless of where I rank him, nobody can dispute his talent and his career. And you and I have both agreed that, he's not the greatest fighter ever, but he may have had the greatest career when you take in totality of how much money he earned and the absence of punishment that he endured. So I think it's actually a positive that he had. And plus, if you're with Mayweather, Jack, people are going to pay attention to you because they think they're going to see the next Mayweather. That's what got Tank all the attention, but Tank ended up being the real deal. Could box, could punch. They moved him along. And, he is somewhat of a pay-per-view star today, which kind of boggles my mind. But the bottom line is the numbers say that he is.
Yeah, interesting thing we didn't touch upon. Mayweather offered to train Errol Spence for the Crawford rematch. And you wonder what the motive is. Maybe he doesn't want Crawford getting to be that big. And maybe he really feels he could lead Spence to victory. But with that said, if Spence was, he went out he left Derek James, his career trainer. And had he joined forces with Mayweather, Spence met Mayweather and said, "Look, let's work out a trainer's fee. I'm putting myself 100% under your supervision to fight Terence Crawford." It might actually be a good move, because I think Mayweather would be a heck of a good trainer. He has trained guys. Okay.
But Jack, we don't know about the chemistry. I think there's a lot more to it than that. I don't think that Mayweather could have just jumped in there and really done that much over one fight And Floyd would want Earl, I think, to box, to jab, and probably to move a little bit because that's who he was. That's not who Spence is. Now, maybe Floyd would grasp that and not go that way about it as far as training him. I just don't think it would have made a difference. I just think the talent is ultimately what won the fight.
I'm going to tell you.
And I think you agree.
Yeah, I do. All in all, trainers, I hate to say it, and trainers will get mad at me. They're not difference makers on balance. They can give a fighter a little bump, okay? A case in point was Lennox Lewis. Lennox Lewis was still a heavyweight title holder
under Pepe Carrera.
Yeah, then he linked up with Emmanuel Stewart. Stewart made him better. He gave him that bump. I mean, that's all you could ask. They're not going to be a big difference maker. Like you keep hearing about all these big name trainers, oh, they should hire him and him and him. And maybe for one fight, things work out well. I was reading a book I read it many years after it came out on Ricky Hatton. And Ricky Hatton at the time was unbeaten when the book came out. He was trained by Billy Graham, not the former fighter, the trainer in England. And he said he'd never blame his trainer if he lost the fight, that he loves Billy Graham. He's never going to get another trainer. If he loses, it'll be all on him. He loses to Floyd Mayweather. And what does he do? He gets another trainer, Floyd Mayweather Sr. Okay, first fight under Mayweather Sr. Mayweather, they look good. They beat Paulie Malignaggi. They stop him. And the talk is, oh, what a difference maker Mayweather Sr. is. It's like Hatton never won a fight before. Then in the next fight, he gets flattened in 2 rounds by Manny Pacquiao. So, well, show me what the difference was. You mean to tell me he wouldn't? Yeah.
I hate to use this example because I really actually, this guy's one of my favorite fighters, but it coalesces with the trainer. Would you agree Manny Stewart's one of the best trainers that we've seen?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And Manny Stewart's best fighter was Thomas Hearns, right? And Thomas Hearns, as great as he is one of the all-time great pound-for-pound punchers, maybe the best junior middleweight ever. Jack, Thomas Hearns lost the 2 biggest fights of his career with Manuel Stewart in his corner against Leonard and against Hagler. And the reason has nothing to do with Manny. They were just a little greater than Tommy. So you could look at a guy like her at Stewart, one of the best trainers, his best fighter lost his 2 signature fights. I don't think it bodes bad on him. Angelo Dundee couldn't beat Joe Frazier with Jimmy Ellis, but he beat him with Muhammad Ali after losing to him. So I do think, as Dundee would say, there are horses for courses, but at the bottom line, I think it's the horses. I think somebody else could have ridden Secretariat to the Belmont win.
All in all, I agree. In the case of Jimmy Ellis, Angelo Dundee worked wonders because Ellis was a career middleweight when he came to Dundee. So in that case, the job Dundee did was dramatically great.
But he was never going to beat Frazier.
No, he was never going to. No. I mean, you can only take it so far.
Exactly.
I mean, one guy is so much better than you, bringing in a new trainer, which is a great example you're giving for Errol Spence in regards to Terence Crawford. No trainer is going to work like wonders and make Spence beat Crawford at this point.
Jack, do you remember Stan Hochman?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Stan. Yeah.
The Philadelphia writer.
Oh, Stan Hochman. I think he meant Stan Hoffman, the fight manager. Hochman,
H-O-C-H.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, okay. Course. As you know, he was, a big-time Philadelphia sports writer. He covered boxing. He was an original investor in Cloverleigh, the team that backed Frazier. And I remember him telling me, I forget when it was, it must have been sometime in the 80s. We were at a fight in Atlantic City. And here's a guy that invested in Frazier in the Cloverleigh. And he said he interviewed Angelo Dundee about a week before Jimmy and Joe fought. And he said before he talked to Dundee, he was certain that Frazier was going to beat Jimmy Ellis. He says, after talking to Dundee, he said, I had reservations. He goes, and I even think in my column, I ended up picking Ellis. He goes, I'll never do that again.
We get caught up in the hype. We look at a fighter, his conviction, his confidence, and we want to believe it. He kind of convinces us. Like you see Canelo with Charlo after the weigh-in. This time it actually did work. And you can see Canelo throwing some punches, happy, and you see Charlo a bit stiff. And we tried to read into things, and you really can't. Even though, let me tell you a little story.
You can.
When Lennox Lewis fought Michael Grant, okay, at Madison Square Garden, a lot of people were giving Grant a shot at winning the fight because he was supposedly the future, the heavyweight division. And
I remember that.
Told on Lewis. At that time, Frank, I used to cover all the club shows in New York, and this is before the age of the internet. So the commission knew me. Fringe members who they knew me. So I show up at the rules meeting. The media wasn't supposed to be there, but I just casually walk in. Eventually, they asked me to leave after about 20 minutes because I shouldn't have been there, or technically. But as a reporter, I want to see what's going on. I see Grant sitting by himself in the corner, sulking, like he doesn't want to be there. He's not mad. He's just upset. And Lewis calmly is looking at the gloves, talking at the rules meeting, hitting him, asking questions, getting his head is wrapped around the fight. And Grant's head was nowhere wrapped around the fight. You got the feeling Grant would have been doing cartwheels had they told him the fight was canceled.
Wow,
okay?
really?
So, right. So in a case like that, once in a while, you can, kind of see a mood of a fighter if he doesn't want to be there at all. But you're right. The story with Hartman after talking to Angelo Dundee, figuring Ellis could do it. But sometimes it works in reverse. Ron Borges picked, great writer from Massachusetts. Ron Borges picked Holyfield to beat Tyson in the first fight when virtually no one was picking Holyfield at that stage because Holyfield.
That put Ron Borges' name on the map.
Right. He's a great writer besides.
Right. But it's that really got him a lot of attention.
I did. But Ron Borges, he based it on this. He interviewed Holyfield. He listened to what Holyfield had to say. And he interviewed Tyson, and he figured, Holyfield just sounds more confident, like he really believes he's going to win. He really,
Jack, sometimes
he based it on that.
Sometimes something like that is big, and somebody that's neutral can have a feeling that somebody better than somebody that's on the inside. Jack, where I first realized that? It's 1985. It's a Monday night football game. The Dolphins are playing the Patriots. Dan Marino brings the Dolphins back in the last minute of the game, and they kick a field goal, and they win the game 30-27. I was a huge Dolphin fan. After the game, I forget who it was on ESPN who was at the game. Maybe it was Chris Berman. They interviewed Andre Tippett. Remember the linebacker 56? Yeah. And Andre Tippett. And at that time, the Patriots had never won in Miami. And Andre Tippett looked at Chris Berman and he said, the Dolphins don't want to see us again. 3 weeks later, maybe 4, they play in the AFC Championship in Miami. The Dolphins were annihilated by the Patriots. The Patriots go to the Super Bowl and lose to the Bears. But sometimes when you speak to that person or you're around them, like Borges picked up with Holyfield, that's the same thing that I heard in Andre Tippett's voice, where it's like, okay, they may have beat us tonight, but they're not better. And if we see them again, they're in trouble. The other side to that is when you have a personal relationship, when you know a fighter and you see what they do. Jack, I was pretty good friends with Tex Cobb. I actually thought watching him train and hearing him talk and based on how he did with Michael Dokes, and me thinking in my mind that Holmes may have a letdown after beating Cooney, that Tex Cobb might have a chance to go to hang with Larry Holmes. And then we saw the fight, and we know he didn't win 1 minute out of 45. And when you know somebody and you like them and you believe in them, you lose your objectivity. I thought the same thing, Jack, when I watched Curtis Parker in the gym. We would get done sparring. We would talk about Hagler. This is like 1978, 1970, between 78 and 80. And I remember telling guys in Philly, Monroe failed basically in big fights against Hagler, even though he gave him his first loss. Briscoe caught him when he was old, when Benny was old. Boogaloo Watts got a gift. I said, this kid, Curtis Parker, might be the guy to beat Hagler. And here it turns out, Jack, Curtis never even fought for the title at 160. So it was clouded by my friendship.
We sometimes get carried away. I've been friends with very few fighters, and I've had relationships with very few fighters. And if I do have one, it's usually when their career's over. We meet at functions, we're friendly, we talk and hang out. I don't know, I can't explain why, but I'll have more of a relationship with people in the business in general, managers, trainers, and fighters.
Right.
One of the fighters years ago who I developed a friendship with, I'm not in touch right now, but we were friends during his career when he came to New York, was a young up-and-coming featherweight, Tom Boom Boom Johnson.
I remember him.
I predicted Tom Johnson was going to be a future superstar, the best fighter in all of boxing, pound for pound. Now, he did win the IBF featherweight title, and he made 11 title defenses, double-digit title defenses. But of course, he never was a superstar that I made him out to be. But statistically speaking, I got a consolation prize, kind of. You mentioned a point, too. I was in Joey Gamash's dressing room when he fought Arturo Gatti because I was doing a story on him to lead up to the fight. You know, I hung out with Joey in the gym. And I believe Joey's going to appoint Gatti because I became emotionally involved. The fight takes place. I'm watching it in the judges and referees room because they messed up my ID tag. So if I went out to ringside, I might not have been able to get back in the dressing room after the fight. And when I see him on the TV screen there, I'm saying, wow, Gatti looks like a giant compared to
Gatti looked like Sonny Liston next to him.
Right. And Gatti demolishes Joey. And how on earth could I have picked Gamache to beat Gatti? Because I was emotionally involved. He became a friend of mine, Gamache. I was emotionally involved. You can't make predictions when a guy's a friend, you know.
No.
Of yours. You just can't.
Jack, I remember this is 205. And Hopkins, it was in between his first fight with Jermaine Taylor, first and second fight. And he's a funny guy. He's hard to get his number, but Bernard Fernandez was his go-to guy. So Bernard told Hopkins, look, my buddy Frank Latirzo is going to call you up. He wants to talk to you. You know, he's going to do a piece for the Sweet Science on you, and he'll be fair. So I get on. Hopkins and I talk on the phone. Jack, we talked for 3 hours. Nonstop. He even called his wife, Jeanette, in and said, Jeanette, this guy's saying a lot of things that other guys aren't saying. But long story short, I said to Hopkins about the rematch with Jermaine Taylor. We're talking and he says, you know, Frankie goes, I messed up. He said, I let him get out to an early lead, figure I could track him down. He goes, I think I did. The judges didn't. I said, Bernard, I don't believe you. He said, what do you mean? I said, my opinion is that in the early going, Jermaine Taylor was a little too quick and a little too energetic for you. And you had to wait until he came down a little bit and burn himself up a little bit before you could go take advantage of him. He goes, no, Frank. He goes, that, you know, I kind of spotted him those rounds. I said, well, I'll tell you what. I says, you're fighting him in 2 months. We'll see what happens. If he doesn't get out to a big lead in the rematch, then you're right, and that's credible. But if he gets out to a big lead again, I'm going to kind of stick with what I believe. Well, what happened in the rematch? Exact same thing. Taylor won the first 5 or 6 rounds, and Hopkins had to try to eat them up and close the distance in the rematch. He didn't do it. I wrote that, and Bernard hasn't talked to me since.
Well, I had a little different view of both fights. Yeah, you're right about the first fight. I thought Taylor legitimately deserved the decision in the first fight. I actually had Hopkins edging the second fight out.
Isn't that something I thought Hopkins deserved it in the first fight, but not the second fight.
Yeah, that's why both decisions, kind of a little controversial.
But Jack, didn't you think? I kind of thought he was done after that.
Frank, we said very quickly. One of the viewers mentioned with Wilfred Benitez, we never talk about him. Next week, let's talk a little about Wilfred Benitez. The only reason we're not going to do it now, I want to very quickly go over women's boxing here. The talk is on the show headline.
And give me a minute because there's something I want to say. Go ahead.
They're gonna, they want to have 12 rounds, 3 minutes. It's going to make women's boxing less exciting. Leave it at 2 minutes. If you want it to be 12 rounds instead of 10, okay, but leave it at 2 minutes because they don't pace themselves like the men, and it's more entertaining to keep it like it is rather than expand it, I think. But what do you have to say?
Jack, as far as what you just said, I like the 12 rounds, and I would even be okay with the 3-minute rounds. And I'll tell you why. In the world we live in today, where a lot of people are saying there's no difference between men and women, which I don't agree with, but you know what? I've been around some women fighters. And you know what, Jack? They train as hard as the men, and they're every bit as disciplined. And think about this. It takes more to be a woman fighter today than it does to be a man, okay? Because you just stand out more. Not many women do it. So I wouldn't have a problem if they change it. The other thing I wanted to touch on, Jack, I haven't talked to you about this. I have no idea what you think, but I know this much. There's talk of Manny Pacquiao wanting to fight in the Olympics next year, and he wants to win a gold medal. I think it's a terrible idea. I think it makes him look like a narcissist. I hope it doesn't happen. What do you think?
I don't think he wins a gold medal. It's only 3-4 rounds, whatever they do it in the amateur, in the next Olympics. I think it's they're 4-rounders, but short fights, he could easily get outpointed at his age, get out hustled by an.
But do you have a problem with him at that age?
It takes a whole thing away from the Olympic spirit. We may as well forget amateur boxing and flush it down the toilet completely if Manny Pacquiao is allowed to fight in the Olympics. What a farce that is.
Can you believe that?
It's terrible.
What is this guy thinking? He won 8 titles. He's going down as one of the greats. And they say he's not going to take a seat from anybody else. But I don't know how that works out, how that's not the case. But I don't want to see this guy. I don't want to see him in the ring with a pro. I don't want to see him in the ring with an amateur. And I just think it's narcissistic that this guy can't let go and he wants to go and fight in the Olympics.
I agree. What's going to be next? Money Mayweather? He's going to say it won't affect.
Yeah, he got cheated out of his gold. He's going to go back and get it.
Yeah. Okay, Frank. Till next week. Good stuff.
All right, Jack. Good talking to you. We'll talk to you next week and we'll review the fights. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for